Hello. Today I'm going to continue with the series, What the Heck Do I Do with This? And today we're going to be talking about charcoal pencil. And I'm going to be using two kinds of charcoal pencils. The first one is just black, and I'm going to use white too. Now with charcoal pencils, you can actually get them in different darknesses, just like with pencils. So you can get some charcoal pencils that are closer to an H range, and then of course some that are in the lower B. So this one is one of the darker ones. And then this is just white charcoal pencil. And white charcoal pencil is essentially the same components of a chalk pastel, but in a pencil form, so you can, sharpen it. So, and then I also have a crappy rag. So, for the smudging, because I don't like to smudge with my fingers because that's gross. So today, I'm going to draw a bell pepper. So whenever you're working with any kind of charcoal pencils, you're going to feel right away that it is very, very different from a regular pencil because the texture is weird. Listen to the way it sounds. It sounds different. And that is because graphite pencils have a mixture of graphite and clay in them, depending on what, whether it's a H or a B or an F or the different hardnesses. And graphite is a, very dark black carbonate material. And the clay, when you add the clay to it, the clay gives it some lightness. So the more clay, the lighter the pencil. The less clay, the darker the pencil. However, with charcoal, the charcoal of the charcoal pencil or the piece of vine charcoal or whatever you have is not graphite. It is actual charcoal. And in the process of metamorphosis, charcoal comes first, graphite comes after. So charcoal is much softer than graphite. And it also doesn't have that slight iridescent sheen that a lot of graphite might have when you're working with that. So, okay, this is my basic bell pepper. Let's put a horizon line like we normally do because we want our things to exist somewhere. Okay, so now we're going to go about laying in the shadows. And once again, with the super scribblies, to lay in where the darkest darks are so that I know ahead of time. And then from there, I'm going to build towards my midtones, just like I did with the other pastel drawing and then also with the Conti crayon drawing. And if you feel really comfortable with charcoal pencil, you should feel an affinity towards Conti crayon and the other way around because they are similar in the way they lay down their color deposit, and then also in the way their permanence, the way they interact with the paper. And so if you can do one, you can probably do the other one as well. Also, I want to say that this paper is just Home Depot drop cloth. Well, it's not cloth, but brown paper that they use to put on floors when people are painting to save the floors from being ruined. And I really like, well, you know what? I don't even know if this came from Home Depot. It might have come from Lowe's. I really like this kind of paper, and the main reason why is because, one, it has a tooth. Two, it's very cheap. Three, you can actually stretch it if you tape it down and add water to it. So it's got a lot of really cool potentials to it, and particularly for how affordable it is. And it tends to be a much heavier weight than a bulletin board paper. So if you have the opportunity to buy yourself a roll of painter's paper from any hardware store, I really recommend doing it because it's a very good way to work very large, because they come in, huge rolls, like, 15 to 60 feet, I think. And, you won't have the pressure of, worrying about ruining a canvas. It's one of my favorite things to work on when I'm thinking or sketching for something that's going to be very large when I'm finished with it. So that is That is a high recommendation. Okay, so now that I have my darkest darks in, before I start layering in my midtones, I'm going to smudge out with my little rag. And you notice, there it goes, smudging away. Smudge, 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 smudge. Once again, not using my finger. And the reason I don't use my finger is because your hand has oils on it and it gets on your paper and it's gross. And I don't fool with that. I use tools. You can do this with your finger if you really wanted to, but don't. If you can do what you want. I'm not the boss of anybody, but I prefer to use tools. Okay, so now my darkest darks are laid in. This is another situation where you would lay down some hairspray to make that more permanent. But once again, I still don't know where my Aquanet is, and so I'm not going to use any Aquanet because I don't have any. I mean, I have some. Somebody's got some, and they probably took it. And I hope the hair looks terrible, because that's what you get when you steal someone's art supplies. Terrible hair. So I'm going to keep building up these midtones and then blending them out and then adding back to my darkest darks very slowly, because I don't want to put a whole lot of pencil down first. First of all, it makes a really gross squeaky noise, and then two, it just kind of sits on top of the paper and does absolutely nothing but sit there. So, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to tell you a funny story. It's not really funny, it's actually kind of a cocky story. Probably shouldn't even be telling it, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So in college, I always skip the first day of every single one of my classes because I always felt it was a free day because none of the professors really counted that day as being absent. So I wouldn't really get in trouble. You know, you would think that college, because you have to pay for it, it's not free, or even if you get a scholarship that you want to get your money's worth. But I was dumb. So I would always skip the first day of class. And so on my intro to drawing class, and I had one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. She was amazing. She told us on the first day, which I didn't know because I wasn't there, to bring in your pencil set, a flashlight, a bell pepper, and a it was a 16 by 20 sketchbook. It was a big sketchbook. Of course, I didn't have anything because I didn't go the first day. So I walked into my class with a number 2 pencil in my back pocket and like a sketchbook, I think. I think that was all I had. I don't know what kind of like cavalier I thought I was just walking in class like that, but I probably looked like the kind of person where, oh, look at this fool, and walking in here like they think they somebody. That was me. And so I didn't have a bell pepper or a flashlight or anything. I had nothing at all. So I had to borrow a bell pepper from this very nice lady who was very prepared, and I felt very bad sitting next to her because she had a little tackle box with all these different kinds of pencils and sharpeners. She had 2 flashlights. She had like 4 bell peppers. She was ready to learn. And so I thought to myself, man, this woman's ready to learn, and I look like a jerk. But she was very nice, and she let me use it. And then I go to start drawing my bell pepper with just my number 2 pencil. And of course, if I haven't mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. I don't use erasers when I draw at all, ever, unless the eraser is part of the drawing itself. I don't use it to erase mistakes. So I just was using the tip of my number 2 pencil, and I drew this bell pepper. And when I was done with it, we had to put them up around the class to be critiqued by the class, which is always a strange thing for me to experience. You know, because how do you know if the people really like your work, or if they're just being nice, or if they're just saying mean stuff because they hate you? So anyway, when my teacher got to my bell pepper, she said, you know, who did this one? And I raised my hand, and she said, what did you do it with? And I pulled that crappy number 2 pencil out of my pocket, and I said, I did it with this. And she was really impressed, or I'd like to think she was really impressed with my capacity to get a dynamic range out of one pencil. And I kind of was super smug about that, which is why I'm telling this story now on the internet for everybody to hear. Okay. Now that I've got my basic bell pepper shape and my midtones kind of where I like them, this would be a really great instance to actually spray it. I am going to put in my highlights, and this is where your white charcoal pencil comes in handy. You don't have to use a white charcoal pencil for this part, but I like to. And so in this process, you can actually mix the two, your darker charcoal pencil and your lighter charcoal pencil, and it's going to give you a gray. You can use the white straight, of course, or you can mix it like I'm going to do right now to get a little bit more, once again, notice the scribbling, to get a little bit more dynamic range. And then kind of blend them out. And then I'm going to put this up here to show that there is a background and a foreground. And what I also really like about working on brown paper is that it gives you this third component that becomes part of your work, and that is, of course, the texture of the paper and the color that kind of pops through. I don't want to completely cover the surface of my drawing. I want some of it to peek between these gaps that I'm leaving when I'm scribbling, because it looks much more, to me, it looks more engaging. And for some reason, just less artificial. I can't really explain why I feel like that, but I do. All right, so this bit is pretty much done. And I realize that this is very loud because charcoal is very loud. Well, I guess it wouldn't be loud if you wet the paper first, which is a trick that you can do. So if you dip your charcoal pencil into a little bit of water and you draw with it, you're going to get a really, really, really nice, rich black line. So that might be something to experiment as well. But of course, I don't have any water right here, and I don't feel like getting up and going and getting any. So you'll have to do that on your own. Or don't do it on your own. Or, you know, do whatever you want. Okay, so now I'm going to put in my white highlights. And what that does is it tends to make everything pop a lot more, especially if you're using a tinted paper like this one is. And all I'm doing is I'm catching the whitest parts or the most vivid parts of this bell pepper. I'm not trying to make it look super realistic, because once again, this is a sketch. It's not a drawing. A drawing takes much longer, well, to me anyway. Like a drawing, you sit there with it for a few hours, and when you're done, you have a finished work that you could in fact frame or show somewheres. Whereas with this, I'm not really going to show this ever. Well, I'm showing you guys, but or whoever's watching. But for the most part, this is just me exercising a technique, which I recommend highly. Not everything has to be some super awesome finished work. It can just be practice. And there, you know, when you do that, you get much better at feeling comfortable with your abilities without worrying all the time, oh, it's going to look ugly, because you won't be as hard on yourself. Well, that's the hope. You know, you might be hard on yourself or not. And let me come back and put some more super darks. But I think the surface is pretty saturated, so I don't think it's going to accept much more charcoal. And this this is a, like I said, a really fast sketch. You know, I could take more time, but I don't want to. So, yeah, I'm gonna call it. Okay, charcoal pencils. Try it out if you want.